Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining ELA today as we dive deep into organic turf care, a practical approach, led by our speaker, Sean Brecken. Before I introduce Sean, I want to make everyone aware that today's session is being recorded and we will have the recording out to you in roughly 2 weeks. If you have any questions about membership or anything ELA related, please feel free to email me at matt@ecolandscaping.org. I am happy to answer any questions you may have about ELA. And as far as other upcoming events go, we do have a few fall conferences coming up in October and November. So I implore you all to take a look at the ELA website for more information on the Season's End Summit and the R&R conference being held in October and November. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce Sean. Sean has a BS in plant science from the University of Delaware and is a NOFA accredited organic land care professional. He has worked for 5 years in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania as a landscape superintendent before moving to Steamboat Springs, Colorado. He owned and operated a landscape company there before he joined the PJC team in 2022. Sean is responsible for caring for their valued customers and developing their organic turf care programs. And without further ado, Sean, I'm so looking forward to this webinar. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you. Very excited to present to you guys this evening. If you have any questions, I'm going to have some notes up. So if you type it into the chat, Mads, if you're able to just kind of alert me. Otherwise, just, this is a pretty open floor. So if you have some questions or need me to slow down, I do talk pretty quickly. And there's a lot of exciting things about organic turf care. So there's a lot that I'm trying to cover in this shortened session. So I'm just going to jump right into it. So PJC Organic, who we are, we're a family-owned business. We're located on the North Shore of Massachusetts in Raleigh. Fred and Pam started this business over 20 years ago, and they are, environmental stewards. Their big push or one of our main taglines is for the next generation. They really believe in the organic movement and keeping our environment safe and healthy for not only current users, but for the future generation. What we do, we manufacture and distribute organic fertilizers, soil conditioners, and amendments. And what I do specifically for the company is developing programs for schools and municipalities. I work with their Parks and Rec departments and DPWs on how to actually roll out an organic fertility program for, any of their parks or athletic fields. And then I provide support to landscapers who do organic land care. We have a two-part system. So this is what we call the practical approach, and it's coupled with proven products. So the practical approach really encompasses 5 different phases that we're going to take a deeper dive on today. We're going to go into each soil testing, chemistry, soil biology, soil structure, and cultural practices. The 4 chemistry, biology, structure, and the practices make up what we call the healthy turf circle. So soil chemistry, soil biology, soil structure, cultural practices. So each part of this wheel is tantamount to the other. Our approach is to create healthy soil that will in turn feed the turf plant. And by using a soil focused approach, we believe that by creating a healthy environment, we create healthy stands of turf grass. And like I said, each part requires the other in order to have healthy turf, whether it's an athletic field or a homeowner's lawn. So our goal really is to change the underlying soil conditions. This image, it's a very simple image of a very complex system in the soil. So If we were to look at soil, 100%, 20 to 30% of it's water, 5% of it is organic matter, 45 to 50% of it is mineral composition. Pore space, this is a very important one. This is where the roots grow of the turf grass. So that's kind of what we call air. There's a gas exchange between the atmosphere and the soils, and that's critical to growing healthy plants, whether it's turf or trees or shrubs, or anything really for that matter. So when we're looking at the soil, our approach is to soil test. It provides us a snapshot as to what's going on with the soil chemically. So for anyone who's familiar with or is interested in soil testing, you can do this kind of soil test any time of the year. It's a chemical analysis of the soil. When we do it, we get a good visual of what's going on in terms of soil composition, what it's made out of, whether it's sandy, silty, loamy, clay. But we also provide this service, up and down New England, down into the mid-Atlantic. And I can guess with probably 90% accuracy what the soil composition is based on what I'm seeing with the soil chemical analyses. How to soil test, pretty straightforward. You dig the dirt from different areas around your property, mix it, and throw it into a bag. We use a commercial lab that's actually located down in Virginia. So when you do mail in these samples, if you were to soil sample through us, we provide you a really nice layout of everything that's going on with your soil. So again, just to highlight some of the benefits, it's a snapshot. I think about it as blood work. When you're going to a doctor, it's a good baseline of what's going on with the soil. In my role, it's really great at setting a baseline for budgets and expectations for a customer. When we're dealing with governments, Parks and Rec, we really need to effectively communicate objectively what's going on with the soil and how we can best address the soil conditions to get their fields where they need to be. Here's what we do test for. So in this left-hand column, we have narrowed it down to 4 criteria. I credit Fred. He's our president. He's been doing this for, like I said, 20 years. And here's the 4 criteria that we consider most important. And this is in order of priority. So pH, organic matter, cation exchange capacity, and calcium to magnesium ratios. I'm just going to go quickly into why these things are important. So pH, we'll see a graphic in a little bit on it. But as in terms of why it's so important, this range 6.2 to 6.9 is because the most amount of nutrients are available to the turf plant. Organic matter, we classify or qualify 5 to 15% of the soil being organic matter as ideal. If you remember the graphics that I showed about 4 slides ago, 5% of the soil is organic matter. And to no surprise, a lot of the soils that we see are coming on new construction, homeowner lawns where the soil has been depleted. They dug for a foundation. It's very low quality topsoil, and it never has really had the chance to get a lot of organic matter. Cation exchange capacity, it sounds like a really big name, but cations are positively charged nutrients that are in the soil. And why this is so important is because roots are negatively charged. So we think of them as magnets. The more positively charged nutrients that can attract to the negatively charged roots, the better chance we have of getting nutrients into the turf. And this last one, it's base saturation, which is a more specific breakdown of the macronutrients that are in the soil. So this is a substrate of cation exchange capacity, and we really like to look at calcium to magnesium ratios. We do not test for micronutrients. Micronutrients are generally already in the soil abundantly. They can just be locked up because they're not in a certain pH range. We don't do bioassays for anyone who's familiar with that. I've interpreted bioassays for clients, but we strongly believe that if we create the environment to allow biology to proliferate, they will proliferate as they need to. So learning how much fungus or how much bacteria is in the soil isn't our top priority, and we do not do burst tests. Again, we do this stuff as a chemical analysis because we can do it all throughout the whole season. This is what a soil test report looks like. So when you send something off to the lab, you kind of get these confusing numbers, not really sure what it means. And that's kind of where we really step in. So when we get something like this, we then provide you with a breakdown of each of those 4 criteria that I discussed. So pH, organic matter, cation exchange capacity, and the calcium magnesium ratio. And once we're in this phase, we're making recommendations on products to how best influence the soil. So in each of these different criteria, there's different product sets that are going to best improve that soil condition. So I'm going to jump into all of the parts of our healthy turf circle. And again, in order of priority here. So we're going to be talking about pH. This is the soil chemistry component. It's not the most exciting thing to talk about, but it probably is the most important. So our goal, again, is to create a hospitable environment for soil biology in an organic turf care program, as opposed to synthetic programs. Organic fertilizers are dependent on soil biology to give nutrients to the turf grass, where a synthetic program, they put salts basically into the soil and then hydrate it so it becomes a soluble solution and force feed the turf plant. The downside of that is over 50% of the fertilizer ends up running off into our waterways. And anyone who I'm sure is on this call is very aware of the ecological impact that fertilizers are having on our water system. So the big benefit of organic is about 99% of the fertilizer that gets applied is actually used by the turf plant. And again, we need a good environment for the biology to do their job. This is a graph of pH and why it's so important. So again, I discussed earlier that a range of 6.2 to 6.8 is acceptable, and we consider ideal to be 6.5 to 6.7. And this is a measure of acidity and alkalinity of the soil. So if you look at the top of the graph, it gives a qualification for what the numbers on the bottom mean. So a strongly acid soil, think about like a dense oak stand, an old mature forest, that's going to be a fungal dominant soil. A strongly alkaline soil, I often compare to like a parking lot island, something that was kind of dug up. It's very low quality soil. You're going to see a lot of bacteria in strongly alkaline soils. We're kind of looking for this sweet spot, the slightly acidic, slightly alkaline, kind of window. And if you look at the availability of these nutrients, so again, a 6.5 is what we qualify as ideal. If you just go up and down the list, you see that all of the nutrients are available. This is the soil, or sorry, this is the plant nutrients, macronutrients, and micronutrients. So this is the second part of soil chemistry. I'm not going to belabor this, but the primary ones that you're seeing on fertilizer labels, the NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. We don't use any phosphorus in our formulas. It's banned in certain states in New England, but largely phosphorus is available, and it's typically abundant in soils as it is. So when pH is in range, plants can call on it when they need it. Turf plants don't need an abundance of phosphorus. Phosphorus is mostly used for flowering plants, and turf grass is maintained, for a walking or athletic surface. So it's constantly getting cut. It really only needs nitrogen and potassium, which is a big reason why our formulas are the way they are. The other ones that I just want to point out, non-mineral, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, obviously water, H2O, that's an important one. Carbon is a measure of carbon, of organic matter in the soil, sorry. So carbonic acid, and carbon is essential because it makes up all of the molecules within the turf plant itself. They're quote unquote organic compounds, not organic as we've come to understand it. In terms of maintenance practices, it's organic from a chemistry standpoint. So these are the two products that you would need to address soil pH. So lime is something that people are probably familiar with. It increases soil pH, which means that it alkalizes the soil. So we're taking it from an acid soil to closer to a neutral soil. I also think that calcium should start to be considered as important as nitrogen and potassium in terms of turf fertilizer. It does a whole lot of good things, mobilizing nutrients, beyond just adjusting soil pH. Sulfur is what to use if you have a very high pH. So if you have a very alkaline soil, sulfur, once it's added to the soil, becomes sulfuric acid, and it neutralizes the lime that's present in the soil. So if you have too much lime in the soil, you have an alkaline soil, and this sulfuric acid makes it more acidic. So again, we're trying to find a sweet spot to make nutrients available. In addressing the nutrients for turf, this is just a list of our fertilizers that we offer. So PJC Organic Pro Healthy Turf, the 601, 606, 702 plus. The plus here you see on the 502 plus as well. Those are fertilizers and soil conditioners. So they have humates added to them, calcium added to them. So it's a little bit more economical for homeowners. The 606 and the 806 are OMRI listed. And then I just want to touch briefly on corn gluten meal. It's come into popularity. Iowa State had a study that showed that it helps inhibit crabgrass. So we've had mixed results from what I've heard from clients. Some people swear by it, some people don't, but I would say that it is a good nitrogen source, and it's really good early in the season. The second part of our Healthy Turf Circle is soil biology. So this is the microbial and faunal activity in the soil. So, this astounding statistic that I read the other day, there's 7 times more life in 1 gram of soil than there are people on planet Earth. It's an astounding number, in just one handful of soil, how much is actually going on. So I really just want to drive home that the soil is alive. A lot of people call it dirt, but dirt's what's underneath your fingernails. Soil is what we're growing things in, and it's a team effort with how we can best use soil to grow plants. This is the soil food web. Some of you may be familiar with this, some of you not. This is a really awesome graphic of the activity in the soil. So again, a pH that's low, you see more fungi. A pH that's high, you see more bacteria. And then you kind of have these different consumers that are filling out the rest of it. Anywhere from a bird, down to these protozoa and nematodes. We like to focus in turfgrass on creating an environment that's hospitable for bacteria. And the reason is that they do a better job of nitrifying the soil. So that means when we give them these food sources, they turn them into nitrogen molecules that turfgrass needs. And turfgrass needs a lot of nitrogen to grow year in and year out. This is a great quote that I once heard, or that I once read. Microbes are the bridge between soil minerals and plant roots. So again, the soil is alive. There's soil microbes that are doing all sorts of work all the time. They have a symbiotic relationship with the turf plant. So they want to feed the turf plant. The turf plant will slough off roots. These bacteria will then eat this decaying root and then provide the turf with more nitrogen. It's a very amazing system. The third part of the healthy turf circle is soil structure. So again, that graphic that I showed you earlier, this is more thinking about the soil solids in conjunction with airspace and water holding capacities. So we address it mostly through organic matter and cation exchange capacity. So when we were looking through our soil test, the second and third most important thing behind pH are the percent organic matter for its ability to hold water and nutrients, and then cation exchange, again, to how many nutrients we can have in the soil. So these are two points that I really want to hammer home for soil structure, organic matter. This is the carbon base in the soil. So as I mentioned before, one of the critical elements for plant life, the macronutrients, is carbon. So when we're looking at organic matter, it's a measure of carbon molecules in the soil. Increases permeability. So water moving through the soil profile is extremely important, whether it's for turf grass, a forest, a garden that's next to your house. We want water moving lower into the profile. Another very important thing is that it helps maintain soil pH. So we addressed earlier with sulfur or lime how we want to best influence the soil pH. Well, once we have organic matter, we can help buffer that. So it won't be as susceptible to changing year in and year out. This is a very long-term approach when you're trying to build healthy soils, so it's important to stay on it. And the more organic matter that we can get into the soil, the more good things happen. Cation exchange capacity, I mentioned it earlier, it's a measure of the positively charged ions in the soil. So we call them cations. A good way to remember that is the T is a little plus sign. That's how I always remembered it from, early chemistry classes until tonight. So when you're talking about cations, you're talking about positively charged molecules in the soil. We look mostly at calcium and magnesium. Humus is what we're going to talk about here next. So humus is fully decayed organic matter, and it's really only occurs naturally in old growth forests or native soils that it takes almost 2,000 years for this stuff to develop naturally. Our soil scientists luckily have come up with a way to deliver humates, which is a granular form of humus, into soil to try to speed up this effort for cation exchange capacity. We'll go into that in a little bit. And then in terms of soil composition, so clay soils they have a very large ability to hold on to nutrients. So this is something that's very important, because on the other side of the soil composition is sand, which has zero ability to hold nutrients. Where we're located on the North Shore of Mass, we deal with a lot of sandy soils. So it takes a lot of effort to try to get organic matter and cation exchange numbers up to get a healthy soil to grow turf grass in. When you think about being on a beach, there's just nothing but sand. There's things that aren't going to grow there. Where you think of a clay soil, it has the ability to be compacted on itself. It has a lot of different atoms working with each other at the same time, where sand does not. And then, for some of you, you're maybe somewhere in the middle. So we'll at least talk about how to best address it, no matter where you are with your soil test. So humic acids or humus, again, this fully decomposed organic matter. This stuff takes years and years and years to develop naturally. And then we will put up a new parking lot or a new development, and we disturb the native soil. And then we have this depleted soil that we then try to plant these pretty landscapes in, turf grass, trees, whatnot. But we now have these conditioners called humates, which they're the solid state form that get added into whether it's our fertilizers or soil conditioners. These are getting very popular on the market, and it helps to get that nutrient holding capacity back into the soil. So it's definitely a great tool that we have. We're not shy about using it. It's very often recommended based on our soil test results. This was a German soil scientist, Raoul Francais. I do want to note, if you look at his birth and death date, 1874 to 1943, and he exclaimed, "Humus is created from life, for life, and by life." When we're dealing or addressing things through this organic approach, the practical approach, we're getting a lot of information from science predating this 1960s. We're looking at what they were doing in the 1800s, because they didn't have synthetic based fertilizers then. So they had to be wise in how they actually developed healthy soils to grow crops, for animals to forage on. So we're really looking at what they're doing and how we can best apply it in today's practices. These are two of our products that we use to address soil chemistry, soil biology, and soil structure. So the S3 on either one of these products is for those three parts of the healthy turf circle. So Charge S3 is geared towards organic matter. Here's its composition. So it has blood meal, biochar, molasses, and kelp. And it's really aimed at feeding soil biology. And the biochar is a great source of carbon getting into the soil. So just by the nature of the product itself, it's increasing organic matter. The second part of that is returning clippings. So when you're mowing, you're increasing organic matter that way. And what we're trying to do, again, with organic matter is water retention and getting nutrient holding capacity. Boost, this is a new product for us. This is really targeted to nail the last two parts of the soil test result. So cation exchange capacity and calcium to magnesium ratios. So it has chelated iron, which is really important with green up and photosynthesis. What I do want to note that's interesting about iron is it's not abundantly available at the pH that turf grass needs to grow. So it's a good tool to have in fertilizers or soil conditioners, to have chelated iron in a form that the turf plant can take up. Gypsum is a structural component. I'm going to go into detail on it on the next slide. And then it has humates. So we just went over humates, how important they are in cation exchange capacity. Gypsum, this is a similar name. Like you see that it's a calcium sulfate and lime is calcium carbonate, but it does different things to the soil. Lime, in increasing the pH, it really has to do with what the carbonate part of the molecule is doing, where the gypsum, the sulfate, is doing a different thing. It's attaching to magnesium compounds and moves them lower into the site. So the last part of our soil test, when we're looking at calcium to magnesium ratios, we can often tell how porous the soil is. So if it has the ability to move water deeper into the profile, if there's a lot of airspace, it's very vague science, but basically magnesium, too much magnesium in the soil makes for slick soil when it gets wet. So it ends up sticking together, where soil that is rich in calcium, when it gets wet, it doesn't stick together. It's able to hold its form more. So we consider gypsum a great tool in addressing soil structure. It also delivers calcium again, which I think is as important as nitrogen and potassium. This is the last part of the Healthy Turf Circle. So this is probably what most of you are going to benefit the most from with the practical approach. So this is the day-to-day, year-to-year operations of what you can do to improve your soil and improve the way that your turf appears. So it's broken down into mowing height. So we'll talk about each of these in detail. Watering, core aeration, overseeding. That's a very huge practice that is neglected. And we'll go into that. Weed management, we'll save questions at the end for that. That's usually a popular one for weeds that people are experiencing. And turf blankets. If any of you use or maintain athletic fields, turf blankets are a great tool to get seed germinating and kind of get the turf grass awake, but we won't go into too much detail on that. This is a graphic that we developed to serve as a reminder of the window of a typical turf grass growing season. So we're only going March to October here. For those of you in the South, you have a much longer growing season. But if you look in March, where we don't really have a lot of microbial activity, it's very cold up here. The soils are still cold. We're not really seeing anything, as opposed to June, where we're seeing a big spike in microbial activity. And again, we're dealing in organic turf care, so we're trying to feed the soil biology in the most important windows. There is a relationship with the atmospheric temperature, so how warm it is outside, and soil biology. But you'll see here between late June and August, it's been a cooler summer than normal up here. But similar to us, it gets really, really hot outside. The microbial activity, tends to decline. I equate it to humans going indoors into the air conditioning. It's hot, it's humid, it's really hard for us to function optimally. But then as we move through August back into September, that's prime time growing. We see a big increase in microbial activity once again. There's great temperatures for growing turf grass. We get warm days and cool nights. This is a great time to be overseeding. You have good germination time. Right here, you'll see a little spike in microbial activity. This is usually around the end of September or early October. For those of you down south, maybe it's October or November. This is to indicate the sudden increase in microbial activity is because they're reproducing around the time of the first frost. They kind of freak out and they go into reproduction mode, but then as it gets colder, very cold at night, they also, their activity declines significantly.
Hey, Sean, sorry to interrupt. Your presentation, we can't see your presentation anymore if you are still, oh, there it is.
Oh, really? How about now?
I see it now, yeah.
Okay.
Like, went to sleep for a minute, but thank you.
Okay. All right, we're on the mowing slide now. Are you able to see that?
Yes, we are able to see that. And for those of you who are saying it's not full screen, just press the 3 vertical dots and then click change layout and spotlight, and that should do it.
Great. I'm going to go into the mowing here. So some of you may have heard some phrases like no mow May. It's gained a lot of popularity and traction. But I want to kind of drive home this moniker of mow high May, June, and July. The downside of no mow May, while it may be good for water retention and getting a healthy stand of turf to a degree, we're dealing with athletic fields or lawns where having it mown tightly is very nice aesthetically. And the other critical component of mowing is returning grass clippings for organic matter. So we like to mow high, anywhere between 3 and 4 inches. I personally like around 3.5 inches. It crowds out weeds. It has a tall canopy. It feels really good on your feet. And you'll also only have to mow it once a week once you're over 3.5 inches. So for anyone who's doing athletic fields, we do have recommendations on that. We're going to stick more to the homeowner side of things. An important note for mowing is when there's weeds in flower or in seed, I do recommend bagging. You don't want to be dispersing that. We're not using chemicals in an organic program. Herbicides are not good for users. They're not good for water. They're not good for the environment in general. And they're especially not good for soil biology. So our best way to manage weeds is through mowing high, and when they're in flower, make sure that they're not getting returned. The picture on your left here, this is Stanford, Connecticut.
And Sean, your presentation went away again for some reason. I'm not quite sure why.
I'm not sure either.
Yeah.
Hi, can I just chime in? There's a woman, Karen Olson Weaver, who keeps hitting share her screen. So if you can lock the other folks out that are watching the presentation, that should clear that problem up.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, we can't see your presentation at all, Sean. I'm sorry. It is just your profile picture. Now we can see it again. I'm not sure what keeps on happening, but every few minutes, it kind of, for the past 5 minutes, it's gone back to your profile picture.
Okay. And you said you are seeing it now?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So this table is for mowing frequency. So the number of days between mows, you shouldn't take off more than 1/3 of the plant. If it's 1/2 of the plant or greater, we consider it scalping, which is problematic from getting disease and aesthetics of the turf plant. So when you're mowing, make sure that it's only, the top third. Make sure that you're mowing with sharp blades, so you can present a lot of disease if you have dull blades. So the rule of thumb generally is to have your blade sharp or replace your blade once every 25 hours of use. So for a homeowner, that's honestly probably once a summer. If you're a landscaper and you're out in the field, this could be, once every few weeks. When I own my landscape business, what I would do is have sharp blades. I'd purchase them at the beginning of the season and just replace them throughout the season. And then at the end of the year, I would go ahead and sharpen everything for the start of the upcoming year, because, things get hectic when you're a business owner, especially landscaping. And the last thing you feel like doing when you get home is sharpening blades, but taking one off and put one on is really fast. So again, if you're mowing high May and June and July, or mowing high in my mind throughout the entire year, the ideal height of cut for me is 3.5 or 4 inches. It's once a week. That's plenty if you're a homeowner. I don't think anyone wants to be out there more than that. I think anything less than 2 inches, if it's not an athletic field, is like recreational mowing. You just like being out there and mowing. Here's a watering chart. This is a watering approach for irrigation that we adopted. It's the 1-2-3-2-1 method. Again, like mowing, the mowing chart, it's a guide. So depending on what climate you're in, early spring when temperatures aren't crazy high, we're looking at 1 day a week for supplemental watering. We're trying to get anywhere from 3/4 of an inch to 1 1/4 inch of water into the soil per week. We usually move to 2 days a week. This year, it was cool all the way into June, but around May 1st, if we're in a drought or if it starts to warm up, we're looking to water twice a week. And I usually recommend to clients going with that until the official start of summer of June 21st. Midsummer, the dog days of summer, you're not getting frequent rainfall. It's hot at night, so you're not getting any reprieve for the turf grass in the nighttime, where this time of year we typically are. So you're watering typically 3 times a week. And then as we transition out of the dog days of summer, we're back down to 2 times a week. And that usually goes until the official start of fall, or at least that's what I recommend in New England. I think Mads has mentioned that she's in 103 degrees in Virginia right now. So I'm sure that you guys are still on a 3-day-a-week schedule. The idea is to get deep root watering. So we don't just want to syringe the turf plant, as it's called, or overwater. You can create compaction issues. You can create disease issues. We want to grow a robust turf plant. So we want the soil to get saturated, the roots to take up as much as they can, and for it to move to the soil profile before we're watering it again. The other thing I want to recommend is making sure your watering cycles are finished before the sun's out. So as best you can to water somewhere in the middle of the night. A lot of water is lost at evaporation during the day. And I lived in Colorado for 6 years, and water is a big issue out there. So we had all sorts of watering restrictions. We have watering restrictions in New England. So when you are watering, you want to be efficient about it, and doing so where you're not going to lose so much to evaporation. The next cultural practice is core aeration. So this is super important. However, you're getting compacted soil, whether that's from athletics, student athletes using the fields, or adults in parks, or if you're a homeowner and you host a lot of barbecues or parties, soils can get compacted. Turf does a good job of getting walked on. That's why we use it for outdoor settings, but the soil underneath of it can get very compact, and core aeration is our best tool to mechanically relieve that. So we talked about the chemical side of things with organic matter and cation exchange capacity, and then we discussed gypsum. Those are some chemical ways to alleviate compaction, but mechanically we like to core aerate. The pore space is where the roots grow. So anytime that we can get air exchange and water exchange in this kind of, large volume setting, we're encouraging deep rooting. It's also a great opportunity to overseed or get your fertilizers and soil conditioners down into that root profile. It's very hard work to core aerate. I don't want to, pretend like it's not. So when we do core aerate, it's important to take advantage. I also, there's a very interesting phrase that I heard that the pores, the living space of the roots are kind of the lungs of the soil. So again, there's this gas exchange between the atmosphere and the roots. So the more pore space we have, the healthier roots we're going to have. Overseeding, I mentioned it there at the tail end as a part of core aeration. So aeration and overseeding, just some pros and cons. Like I said, it's labor intensive. It's timing is very important. We're going out, our service division's going out doing core aerations this week, but if we get a big rain, it's really hard because you can make a muddy mess. So making sure that you take advantage of the weather when you can do it, get it done and make sure to overseed. There's some issues in the spring. A lot of people believe that we present more opportunity for weeds to grow. On an athletic field, a lot of weeds come from compaction. So it's a, two-sided sword. Slice seeding, that's another common one. I encourage this a lot on athletic fields. It's a discreet way to get seed to soil contact. It's very efficient. Seed's gotten very expensive, but it's typically used on new surfaces. It's not very good at being incorporated into dense stands of turf. That's where aeration and overseeding comes in. Here's some grass seed varieties. So your ryegrass, Kentucky bluegrass, these are pretty standard. I'm not going to go too far into these details, but make sure that when you're looking for grass blends when you're looking for grass seed, look for good blends. I most often recommend an 80-20 or 100% rye. Ryegrass is most dominant in the spring and late fall. So think of cooler temperatures, but it's going to fizzle out in the summer. So that's when you want a turf type tall fescue that's going to do well in the heat. Kentucky bluegrass. So Kentucky blue is a tough grass to grow. It requires a whole lot of nitrogen and a lot of water, but it is beautiful. So for athletic fields, it's very commonly recommended. You typically see it in a 50-50 blend or an 80-20 or a 70-30. So just be mindful if you're using Kentucky blue. It is pretty, but it takes a lot of work. Here's two other kinds, turf type tall fescue. This is the most common blend that I recommend anymore is a 70-20-10 or an 80-10-10. Turf type talls they're a workhorse turf grass variety. They do very well in summer heat. They don't need a lot of water and they don't need a lot of nitrogen. So they kind of check all those boxes while also not really getting disease. It's not the prettiest turf plant. The seed developers have come a long way. There is a lot more beautiful varieties now than there used to be. But again, we're looking for a blend. So the key with healthy turf grass is having a diverse stand. So some combination of turf type tall, Kentucky blue, and rye. Fine fescues are what you're going to see in shade. They don't like getting walked on. You won't see them in any sports blend or normal lawn blend other than a shade mix. Weed management, there's just a few I'm going to go through, but this is honestly the most common question I get from people who are thinking about going organic is how are we going to manage weeds? And I always tell them that we're trying to grow grass. So let's not focus on killing weeds. Let's focus on growing grass. There's this quote, it's one thing to kill weeds. It's another thing to grow grass. And that's from Pam, our CEO. Just a quick take home from this is herbicides are often antibiotics and contain antibiotics. And what we're trying to do is encourage soil biology. So it's counter to what we're trying to accomplish. We're trying to allow soil biology to proliferate. So let's not kill it and set everything back. Crabgrass, you guys are probably seeing this everywhere these days. But right now, or what I want you to understand about that is this is all comes down to underlying soil conditions. So typically you see crabgrass in a low pH soil. It's compacted and it's typically low calcium. So again, if it's compacted soil, it typically has more magnesium than calcium, or a greater ratio of magnesium and calcium. So we want a more porous soil surface. That's why you see it along sidewalks and driveways. Again, high height of cut and overseeding. This is clover. So this is a low pH soil. So low pH soils don't have as much nutrients available. So there's typically present when there's low fertility. So the soil wants more nitrogen. So it puts this amazing plant into the ground that fixes nitrogen. So it puts nitrogen into the soil. It's not ideal for athletic field settings, but I personally don't have an issue with it in a homeowner's lawn. I love pollinating plants. They're critical to our food systems. Dandelion, this is another one like crabgrass. It's a low or absent calcium, which means that it's bound. The calcium is bound. Plantain, this is a highly compacted soil. You see this a lot on athletic fields. So this could be from overwatering, bound calcium, you know, a whole lot of things. But it's very common for anyone who's doing athletic fields. I'm sure a few homeowners here are seeing it. There's a few other notable weeds. We can leave that for questions. Grubs, this is a popular one. So if you're seeing a lot of grubs, we consider it more than 7 per square foot, and it's worth treating. We do see after a few years of being organic that is not a lot of grub pressure. Soil biology seems to regulate itself, police itself a little bit. We do offer an organic treatment, which is cedar oil. So a couple of things it does, it basically traps the grubs. They can't move. So they either suffocate, their shells kind of dehydrate, they lose moisture, and they move around with pheromones, and it seems to disrupt that. But it's a good option if you have a lot of grub issues and you're managing it organically. So the takeaway here, weed management is to grow healthier grass. Again, we're not trying to kill weeds, we're trying to grow grass. So a dense stand that's mown high is the best defense you have against weeds. Again, ask yourself, why is it here? It could be a deficiency in fertility, calcium issue, too much traffic, all sorts of things. And when possible, opt for manual removal of weeds. Do not encourage herbicide use to anyone. I'll leave this one up here for a minute. This is the 10 steps to organic turf care as we define it. So we went through all these. This is just a recap. Soil testing. We're feeding the soil biology. We're adjusting chemistry. We're improving soil structure. And then 5 through 10, mow properly, return grass clippings. All these are cultural practices. So we're looking at dividing this into what we can do underneath of the soil. How can we influence the underlying soil conditions? And then what can we do above the soil? What are we doing week in and week out to improve things? Here's just a quick recap. Seed blends and products. I'm running short on time, so I'm going to just buzz through some pictures. This is Bedford, New Hampshire. This is one of our very well versed organic clients. She does an outstanding job, Britt. This is our R&D department in Raleigh, Mass. This is Topsfield, Mass. This is one of our neighboring towns. Ardsley, New York. This is a football field that we've been partnered, or this is a high school that has a football field and a bunch of other fields. We're going to work with them for I think 14 years. They've been organic. This is Cheshire, Connecticut. This is a very tightly mown field hockey pitch. So, we get criticisms, or the organic industry gets criticisms that it can't be maintained this way. And it obviously can. A good overseeding schedule and fertility schedule, and you have a beautiful area to play field hockey. This is Stamford, Connecticut. This was before they started partnering with us. This is Troy 1, one of their softball fields. That was 2019. In 2022, they went fully organic citywide, and this picture on the right is 1 year of being fully organic. It looks like a university level softball field. All right, you guys have any questions?
Yes, there are a fair number of questions in the chat.
Great.
First and foremost, would it be possible to send the presentation to ELA staff so we can share it with those who registered?
Yeah, I definitely can.
Awesome. Great. So the first question was, do you have a reference or citation for the fact you stated about 50% of fertilizers running off from the site? It would be great to have a reference as a backup when we are repeating this fact to others.
I do. Am I able to provide that to you?
Yeah, I can.
It was like a Ohio State study from like 2011, and it was done on agricultural lands, and I think they were in partnership with Duke or something, and it was pretty astounding how much was actually running off.
Yeah, that is a much larger number than I would have anticipated as well.
Right.
The next question was, what can be done when N, P, and K levels in the soil are above optimum or excessive?
Yeah, that's a good question. I honestly would be surprised to see a soil like that could be getting tested. You don't need a ton of nitrogen for a tree. Kind of does its own job of manufacturing it within the tree itself. But I would say, I equate turf care to maintaining your body. You're in great shape for one season, so you suddenly slack off and things aren't, you're not in great shape the next season. Once you have good things, you got to just constantly be supplementing the turf plant. And if you are above optimum, I think that's great. I'm wondering if the pH is in range, because then you're getting good stuff. But definitely be overseeding that lawn. Take advantage of the rich soil and get a lot of seed into that seed bank.
Nice. The next question was, what do plants use aluminum for? I noticed that you have it on your list of ions for CEC.
Yeah. So I guess two things. I don't know precisely what aluminum's used for. I do know that aluminum toxicity is a big issue. So in the soil, aluminum will bind to a host of nutrients. So it can create a toxic system for the turf itself. I'm sure it needs it in small levels for, they use these things for like a cell wall molecule. It's kind of all these little micronutrients get used for different things. Sometimes it's to fight off a disease. It could be getting pulled into the turf plant for something like that. But when aluminum levels are too high, it's a process called imbibition, which it binds up other nutrients. So we don't want that to occur, especially in turf grass. So that's one of the reasons we're concerned about that. And if you're applying lime, it helps flush aluminum out, because it's usually in toxic levels at low pHs.
Nice. Cool. Thank you. There was another question. Can we buy humates and increase humus? Do you suggest any brands or places to get it? I don't live anywhere near you. Sorry.
Yeah, so I do want to be specific on that. So humus and humates, they're conceptually the same, but we're not going to increase humus in the soil by adding humates. So humus is a naturally occurring process in the soil that, again, takes 1,500 to 2,000 years, some millennia. but we are able to add humates. So there's a lot of different brands on the market. I think Diamond Grow is one of like the straight humates that you can buy. You can also buy it as a water soluble humate. So Neptune's Harvest, they sell one now. I mean, we're a reseller of them. So if you want to reach out to me and try to get some pricing on that usually ships UPS versus our fertilizer that's wholesale. But that's usually a good approach.
Cool. I think we only have a few more questions left. The next one was, what is the average annual maintenance cost for a soccer or football field, if you could ballpark it?
Actually, I've got some. So maybe I can just show you real quick. So we have kind of a ballpark system. So anyone see this? So we have like this tiered approach for athletic fields. So like a high performance athletic field down to a low input athletic field. So low input is lower fertility needs, lower budget needs. Maybe the people don't have a lot of staff. Where a high performance field is, like a high end varsity soccer team that's going to the playoffs every year, and the people really want a good pitch for their athletes, and it's varsity, so they get more invested in them. That's typically, like around $6,000 per acre per season. Where on the low end, for a low input field, it's about $2,000 to $2,500 per acre per season. So, a soccer field, call it 2 acres. It's like 75,000 square feet. So just kind of some baseline metrics. And that's where we use soil testing as a big part of how we have that dialogue with schools.
Cool. It looks like we only have 2 more questions left. What is your definition of turf grass? We typically try and use a native fescue mix for lawns in Southwest Colorado. Do your recommendations still apply for the different seed mixes that are not Kentucky bluegrass?
Yes. So maybe down in like Durango, I guess you're in like the San Juans or something. I think buffalo grass is gaining popularity down there. In Steamboat, I use all the same kinds of turf grasses. So I was using, a lot of turf type tall fescues since we had water restrictions up there. Oh, great. Yeah, I see Durango. So turf type tall fescues are going to do wonderfully for you. Kentucky blues, they look good in Colorado, but again, water's an issue there. So let's not put too much nitrogen into the water by overfeeding that. And if you're doing organic, certainly go that route. And ryegrasses, they do well early season. I'm not too overly familiar with Durango's climate, but Steamboat goes from winter to a very, very hot summer to winter. So ryegrasses definitely didn't do the best. They, in the heat of summer, it's 90 degrees and it's just, there's no clouds in the sky. So ryegrass would generally burn up. So I started doing a lot of turf type tall on my lawns. That's where I was.
Nice. And then it looks like our last question is, what do you recommend for stilt grass control within turf in Western Pennsylvania?
Yeah, so that's a tough one. I've had this question from a client earlier this year. They were in a different circumstance. So I recommended them sod cutting it out because it seemed like it kind of became a little bit invasive and starting fresh. If you can manually remove it, definitely try to do the best you can. I can probably find some more specifics on the soil issues that are going on with stilt grass, but it's kind of all the same for us is an aggressive aeration overseeding regimen, trying to get as much good stuff in the soil as you can to crowd out the bad.
Awesome. Well, I think those are the rest of the questions that were in the chat. If anyone has any more questions, can they email you directly, I know I have your email and I'm happy to share it with them.
Yeah, I'll put it up here. I think it's on my last slide.
Perfect.
So I'm on the far left, Sean Brecken. If you have any questions, just shoot me an email. Happy to help anyone on the organic movement, that's for sure.
Awesome. And I am also putting in the chat right now the link to today's evaluation for the webinar. ELA is always trying to improve the education that we deliver to everyone, so it would be a huge help for us to see your feedback. I know there were a couple tech hiccups, but other than that, we really want to hear what you have to say, along with the email addresses for myself and our manager, our office manager, Peggy. So if you have any questions, feel free to use any of those emails. Any questions for Sean, reach out directly to him. And without further ado, thank you so much all for joining us today. Thank you, Sean. Your presentation was incredible.
Yeah, thank you guys. Much appreciated.
Great. Have a great rest of your week, everyone.
See you. Thank you.
Thank you.